So we've gone from a real up-close and personal look that Jim started us out on at trails and how to make them and what's involved in getting out there with your neighbors and friends and collaborators. We've ended up with a kind of broad planning perspective, 50,000 feet up, and really is partly about how you vision existing resources as well as priorities. There's a great power to having this information and using it for access, for knowing what's out there, which you've talked about, for economic development, for promotion, as Matt just put it. And I just want to mention something that came from one of these sessions on the local food system, which of course is growing, becoming very significant. This is about a year and a half ago at the other end of the building. And this one fellow, a local producer in fact, at a little farm, during the discussion period, like the one we're going to have in a sec, said, we really need a map of what's growing here, like Portland trails, map, because he knew about it. And he didn't live right in Portland. He had some land in the Cumberland County area. But that map has had great power in helping to bring people together, to plan, to give vision, to give hope even, that we can really have the best quality of life in our area. I want to mention, by the way, just as an aside, the role of the Casco Bay Estuary Project, which is what it was originally called, in being one of the early efforts to promote regional connectivity around here. It really was a pioneering effort as well. I spent 12 years in its board, so I'm biased towards it. That was some years ago. But we need to think as a region, local and at a metropolitan scale, for our own interests. And, like the planners in the room will know, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, or actually, I see somebody else who knows this well in the audience who snuck in. Around here in New England, our towns, our communities would rather go to hell separately than to heaven together a lot of the time. And that's a quote from Ed Sussman. No, it's not.
And we're well on our way there.
So, it's important to try to think at these different scales. So we were thinking today that maybe after this terrific panel, and it has been really just home run, thank you, that we might try a micro charrette where we break up into groups and so on. We are going to sort of do that, but instead of forcing everybody to completely break up, I think what we're going to do is look at some of the information you have before you, and let you spend a few minutes at tables so you actually can look at it, and we'll help with interpreting it. In that regard, I want to introduce my colleague, Eric Larson. Eric, where are you? Back here, who's part of our team at the Muskie School, who have been developing some of these new information and data resources about the region in cooperation with GPCOG and the Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission and other partners, as part of also the National Science Foundation sponsored Maine Statewide Sustainability Solutions Initiative, which is based at UMaine at Orono, and we participate in that as part of that. So I just want to show you quickly some of this information that you have before you, and forgive me for having to tee it up here quickly. So you have this other portrayal of the information that Stephen Engel talked about with the trails in Maine Trail Finder, with information about which towns have more miles of trails. It's no accident that, as Steve noted, that some of the more urban places, Cape Elizabeth, Portland, Falmouth, have more miles of trails. Charlie Colgan, you notice I mentioned him often, is a key source for many of us. As Bob mentioned as well, they're after Charlie to help with the ET. Charlie has pointed out for some time, particularly in the Changing Maine series of 2 books over the years, for those of you who've seen it, that as we grow more, all of these things become more important, not less important. Having access to trails becomes more important. not less important. So the candidate trails that Stephen mentioned are also portrayed here. The Eastern Trail is shown as an example of one of the backbones. The Mountain Division and S2S are not shown, but you know they're there. Now, there's two other maps here that you can take a look at, and few people have actually seen these in this form, and they're works in progress. So I need to mention they're not complete. And we'll check the pockets, as I said. This is a regionalized zoning map for the areas that we can cover, which basically is the transportation modeling area for this region. And some of these areas in purples and dark oranges and so on, as opposed to yellows, are areas where you can have more mixed-use development, you can have higher density housing, there's centers of activity in the region. This is what the structure of the region looks like. So here are the 202 and 302 corridors up towards Wyndham and the Lakes region, and the corridor out towards Gorham and then into Standish, that Standish Center there, where they now have a form-based code. That's a big mixed-use area, big innovation there. The northern Route 1 area in Cumberland County and the southern Route 1 area. So the third of these maps shows you just before the Great Recession growth forecast for this region for the next 25 years to 2035, 50,000 new housing units, and where they might go based on trends. And where they might go is not an Old Orchard or Kennebunkport, which will lose a little bit, but continuing to the west. This is why when you try to drive into Portland on city arterial streets like Brighton or Forest in the morning, that you're in an immense traffic jam, is because we're a metropolitan region. And all that traffic is coming in from people who live out here to the west. Interestingly, the current forecast shows continued growth in Freeport, but also we don't have Brunswick in here just because of an anomaly in the PAX region model, but we're trying to get it in. But Gray, New Gloucester, and the edges of North Yarmouth and Wyndham, if things pick up again, there's a lot of land up there, and transportation access, and not as many trails, by the way, if you remember some of the stuff we looked at, which you can see on the big map you have. So this is not exactly the future, because this level of growth is not what's happened since '09 to now. And Charlie and others in the state are now working on an updated economic model for the state, and probably by the late winter there'll be a new forecast that can be used by a wide variety of organizations, everybody from school districts, the towns, counties, land trusts can use it, other organizations. Casco Bay, of course, always using these resources. So what we're going to do, I just want to mention one more piece of this. These dots here, see the black acme there? Actually, that's kind of good stuff. Those are 160 centers of activity, or what Evan Rickert, who led this particular identification effort, calls market centers. These are the places where you go, where there's a little shopping center, your doctor's office, maybe some garden apartments, or a little denser housing. They're part of the structure of our region, and I do need to mention, if you will allow me, on behalf of the Sustain Southern Maine project, that one of the backbones of that project, if not the signature backbone of it, really, has been a process of communicating with the towns that have those 160 market centers. Every town has some. And getting 10 candidates starting almost 2 years ago to have some focused work on planning for how these might be developed and redeveloped to really support sustainable growth in the future of all kinds, of which having mixed uses is part, transportation access on a multimodal basis, including trails, and so on and so forth. And November 7th, which is but 2 weeks away, plus a couple of days, on November 7th there's going to be an open house to show the results of those 10 efforts. It's really about 9 right now because, some things slow down. That's going to be at the Pepperell Mill, Doug Sanford's fabulous mill redevelopment in Biddeford. And you're all invited. It's all afternoon from 1:30 to 5, Pepperell Mill, downtown Biddeford, with a really knockout talk at the end of the afternoon with some refreshments and a cash bar, a knockout talk by a woman who has helped Dorchester, Massachusetts, pick itself up and redevelop and find the private and public funds and the local civic will to really make things happen, which is really what these centers are about. They can be created anew, as John and Elliot Chamberlain did. Elliot was mentioned earlier, know him well, with the Dunstan Crossing project. Or they can be redevelopment of areas that exist. For example, the India Street neighborhood in Portland, at the base of Munjoy Hill, in the East End, is one of these pilot centers of opportunity that the Sustain Southern Maine project is piloting. So I'd like you to just take maybe 10 minutes or so to look at these maps, and we'll float around, answer any questions, Eric and I and Stephen, Matt. Yes, Ed?
Just one brief, I'm Ed Susslevic, I'm president of the Greater Portland Council of Governments. First of all, thank you for being here today. Thanks to the panel and our partners, Muskie and the county and everyone working on this. To me, well, one of my other favorite sayings, other than the one you said, is also the only thing Mainers hate worse than sprawl is density. But seriously, folks, I think today is just such a great example. It's a hugely important issue in and of itself in terms of how we can work together more to link these trail networks, not only to link them, but to do a better job of publicizing and marketing them. But as some of you may be aware, we're also trying to do the same thing with public transit in the region. We could be having the exact same discussions about that. So there's housing, so there's a lot of regional themes that we're trying to pull together here. So my hope is that lessons from today on how you guys are already working on regional trail building and data mapping and whatnot will also spill over into some of these other regional challenges that we face. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sussman.